It's 7 o'clock, so we're going to get started with the Wednesday Wind Down with Dan and Friends. So this is the webinar and YouTube show for outdoor enthusiasts and for people that like to drink beer, or tonight I'm drinking the last of my Maker's Mark. I need to go get another bottle of it. I'm Dan Conger. I'm the host of this, and I've got Cynthia with me. Cynthia, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi there. My name is Cynthia Livingood, and I'm actually a 2019 WBC graduate. So that's how I got into backpacking officially. Cool. Was last year with the WBC. And I grew up in Georgia and then spent almost 20 years in North Carolina, and I am fresh in California. Been here for 3 years now. So
welcome to California. That's awesome. So that's good. A good lead into what we wanted to talk about tonight. There's, sometimes we, especially me and some of the guests that come on, we've been backpacking for 10, 15 or more years. And it's hard to remember what it was like when you first started. I have a few good memories of it. So that's why I actively sought out someone that was new or newer to backpacking. Mm-hmm. And thanks for answering the call, Cynthia. I appreciate that. So we're going to start. The idea on this, I wanted to kind of harken back to that. I wanted to remind people what it's like. So especially if you're bringing someone on a trip with you. So if I bring someone on a trip with me that hasn't backpacked before, there's some things that I want to keep in mind, right? If you want to scare someone off, take them on a death march where they got to carry all their own water. Oh, wait, somebody else does that. But you could make it really hard on them and scare them off for good. Or you could ease them into it and be aware of some things. So that's what I'm hoping that we might get out of this. The other thing is, if you are thinking about backpacking or you're new, these are some things that you've just recently gone through, and it might be good for somebody else. So,
Sure.
Awesome. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit more about your outdoor background. So, have you recently started backpacking? But are you new to the outdoors, or have you hiked before? What's that your history on that?
No, so I kind of grew up in the woods, just about. My dad was in the Army when I was really little, and I was born in Germany. My dad used to take me on bolts marches and up to see the castles and hanging off the turrets, to my mother's dismay, evidently. Mm-hmm. And then we actually started really camping when I was in about the 3rd grade. So mid-'80s, started camping. We did tent camping very briefly. My mom did not like the tent camping, so we graduated to a pop-up trailer and had that the whole rest of the time I camped with the family. So we did a lot of state parks, and my dad and I hiked a lot. So that's where that went. In college, I was a recreation major with a focus on outdoor recreation. So one of my kind of dreams at the time before life happened was I had wanted to either own my own outrigging expedition company, or to run a camp and conference center, because I really liked both those aspects of.
So that was always kind of in the background there. So that's where I was going to ask, is like, so what really prompted you to start backpacking? It sounds like the roots were definitely there.
Oh, so, yes.
Awesome. So then somehow you decided, I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm going to learn about backpacking, and is our connection, or that's how I managed to meet you, was through the Sierra Club's Wilderness Basics course, which is a backpacking course that the Sierra Club puts on every year. That, as a way I describe it, if you can walk or hike at the end of 10 weeks, you can be a backpacker.
Exactly.
So briefly tell us about how you felt and what that was like going through that 10-week course.
Well, so back to college real fast. We never got into backpacking in college. I had a tent, we had all the car camp stuff. So all my buddies and I car camped. We couldn't afford all the backpacking equipment, when we started, and that's kind of the segue into how I got involved with the WBC. So backpacking got put on the back burner in college because I couldn't afford it. life happened. I just wasn't with somebody who was doing outdoors kind of stuff. When I got to California, I said, buddy, I'm out here to do some exploring. So I started hiking, got with a hiking group. I met one of the guys, Richard Galvin, who is very active with the Sierra Club and WBC. And he's the one that, you know, he said, hey, you like hiking and everything. Don't you want a backpack? And I was like, well, yeah, but, you know, all my knowledge is from 25 years ago and I don't have any gear. So he said, come to the class. They'll teach you everything you need to know. And, you know, there's lots of people you can borrow gear from. Don't worry about the gear. Just come to the class. And so there I was.
Cool. So, well, one of my next questions was why backpacking? What attracts you to it? I think you've answered the why, but what is it that attracts you to backpacking and maybe even the outdoors? What's the real catch for you? What's your why?
The outdoors, I like being outside. I love the smells. I love the feels. I drive a Jeep Wrangler with a rag top, and I have all my back windows out. Now that I'm in California, like 6 months out of the year, you know, and even in the heat when I go inland and, you know, people are like, how do you do it? I'm like, I don't know. I like the outdoors. I'm very, very comfortable outside. And then the backpacking is, you know, it's just that you go on hikes so you can go see things that you can't see in a vehicle.
Right.
And, you know, you go backpacking to really get even more in the wilderness or to be able to experience even more. Like, you know, if you go climb and just summit Cucamonga Peak during the day, well, you have that hour of whatever the light is, whatever the visibility is, while you're at the summit. That's all you can see. And it's a great view and it's worth it. You know, it's a wonderful day hike. I mean, if you want to take it like a step further, let's see if we can make this a little bit more magical. Well, then you go up in the late afternoon, you've got you know, you get to watch the sunset, you get to watch magic hour as it hits Etowanda Peak, and then it, you know, shadows down on Rancho Cucamonga and that whole valley.
Right.
You've got the lights. You know, you go get your cup of coffee or you eat dinner and you go back and you say, okay, well, how has my view changed? Well, the sun's down and now all the lights, you know, you got the sunset in the morning. It's just, you don't get that when you just day hike.
True. Okay, so let's talk about gear for a couple minutes. So one of the things that the WBC is famous or infamous for, depends how you want to look at it, is their very first backpack trip is a desert backpack trip where you must carry all your own water.
Yes.
So you need 2 gallons of water. There's 16 pounds of gear weight just in water. Okay, so everyone's pack, even the liters, are heavier than they want it to be, right? I'd rather carry 2-3 liters. Actually, most I like to carry is ever 3. So, so tell me about, from that first backpacking trip to now, or to your most recent backpacking trip, tell us about how your gear has changed after that first trip. And maybe you made a change on your very second trip. Or your approach to gear.
So my first backpacking trip was the Desert Backpack 2019. So that was my very first backpack ever. I borrowed, I think, 90% of my gear. Mm-hmm. So someone had loaned me a backpack. Somebody had loaned me, like, most of my sleeping system. I found a $14 mummy bag at the thrift store in Escondido. It's not super great, but I still have it because it's, you know, it's good enough with a liner that I haven't had to spend the big bucks on to get a real sleeping bag yet. My thrift store find is good for now, but, you know, mostly it was just get what I can. Don't worry about how much it weighs. I just need the item, you know, to take with me, whether it was a sleeping system or cooking or whatever.
And that's actually a really good statement, or a really good concept, because as people get in, sometimes people want to buy the most expensive or the very lightweight stuff. And I don't want anyone in my family to know how much gear I have in my gear closet or in my garage, right? Because if you add that up, and then if you add up all the different iterations, because I've not only had one sleeping bag, I've had 4 sleeping bags, or I've had 6 tents. I don't even want to do that math. So, but to ease into it, right? That's a great way of doing it. So while a new backpacker, it's expensive to get your gear initially, or it's hard to put your hands on it. You're either going to pay money for it to be light and maybe not as durable, or it's going to be cheap and cheaper. Some of the things you can do is there's some things that you can leave behind. So did you change how things that you took or that you left behind? Did that change?
Well, I actually did not even own a camp stove until March of this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a real simple food kind of person. I don't need complicated food. So that was, not having to purchase a camp stove and carry that with me. And even now, I still don't use it very much. I use things that, sandwiches or tamales, things that will last, that don't have to be cooked. So.
Now, did you ever bring like a chair, and now you're not doing a chair, or did you ever bring a third pair of pants, and now you're not doing that? Did you do any of that stuff? Were there any changes on that?
I'm still debating on the chair. I do have a backpacking chair. It's one of those that I really, really wanted one. Couldn't afford the $100 1 pound one, so I got like the $25 2.5 pound or whatever.
Okay.
Because there are just sometimes, there's just no place to lean against, and you've been carrying the pack, and it's like, I just want something. I want to rest, and so I'm still debating about whether I'm going to carry that. I did backpack with a friend a couple weekends ago, and she had one of the super light ones, and I'm still debating on that.
Well, one that you might, if anyone hikes with trekking poles, there's actually a really cool. It's either called a sling back chair or a hammock back chair. And I've seen a template on the hammock forms, and then somebody sells one, basically uses your trekking poles and your butt that sits on it. So really it's a backrest more than anything. And it really is under 4 or 5 ounces. Okay. So as a WBC leader, I have seen people bring a 20,000 milliamp or 20,000 amp hour battery for a weekend trip. I've seen people bring a backup to the backup to the backup type of thing. I've seen people bring 3 pairs of pants. I've seen people bring jeans for when they get to camp. I've seen people bring a full pair of tennis shoes. So that's definitely a place where people can thin out. So let's talk about clothing, which kind of fits into that one. Have you made any refinements to your clothing since then? And it's clothing, and then it's layering system, right? Because those two go together, or they are the same.
Yes. So let me show you. Let me pull up a picture here. Hang on.
Mm-hmm.
So okay. So this I've done some refining to. This was some of my first gear. Can you see my mouse if I move it over?
Yep, we can do that. We can see it.
Okay. So got my clothes here. I got it's a thrift store puffy coat, thrift store raincoat there. Some really cool rain pants I picked up at the swap table at WBC.
Mm-hmm.
The other big thing that's of note that I have kind of changed, this long thing right here, that's a pillow.
Okay.
God bless the person who gave it to me. It's a camping pillow, but it
big ass pillow.
Yeah, and it can hurt somebody. A football. So
Yeah.
I've managed to upgrade a couple of things. I got an actual down puffy coat. You can see my little my layers here are a lot smaller than they were in the picture before. I did upgrade and get a super, super nice hyper light raincoat windbreaker there, and I got a little pillow.
Sure.
An actual ultralight pillow. So my sleeping bag is still really huge. Need to fix that, but
So one of the things that I've seen in other people's progression, and I know from my progression, is some of it you need to kind of figure out you, right? When I was younger, I could sleep on the dirt and I was fine, right? When I was in high school and college, I didn't need a pad at all. Like,
Right.
okay, I'm going to be luxurious to get one of those brown. This is going to really date me. One of those brown insulite pads. Look it up. It's ancient. It's really old technology. Okay. Not the blue ones, but they were brown. Okay. That was a luxury for me. And then when I hit 40, I'm like, oh hell no! Like it was an air pad. Yeah, well, then you find that air pads can be quite heavy, and it's like so now I've got a 10-ounce air pad, but it's ridiculously expensive. So
Mhm.
so that there's been the transition. The other thing about that I think is great is you brought up thrift store a couple of times now. Thrift store is a really great location to look for gear, and I think I talked about it on a sourcing gear webinar. And the only thing is you're going to probably get some heavier stuff, but you can find wool if you can occasionally found down. I know Sandra has found super cheap down jacket on clearance. So you can with some little bit of creative work you can change it. The other thing I'm going to add about clothing and layering is as you decide to get at some point you're going to decide to get a new awesome layer. You're going to have $150 or $200 is burning a hole in your pocket, and you decide I want this particular piece of gear. It's going to change your layering system, and then you're going to have to adapt the way you use that. And when you're going to bring that out, what are you going to wear on top of it? What are you going to wear underneath it? And layering systems do change because the gear changes. So just know that you're going to adapt it. Cool.
So my philosophy with doing the backpacking was I knew I didn't have a whole lot of money to throw at it. I know it was going to be kind of a piecing it together. And I think that's one of the things that WBC also teaches us is that don't worry about having all the best stuff right now. You can get on the trail. You can get on the trail and your pack can be a little bit heavy. That's okay. There's no judgment on the trail. Like, oh, look at her. She's got a big pack, or, she's got a Gregory and he has a ULA. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It's just the experience of getting out there. So if you can find it at the thrift store, I put up with a non-packable jacket and, some other stuff for quite a long time because it worked. It's a little heavy and clunky, yep. But I was able to get out there, and that's what was most important to me was being able to be out, cool. In the wilderness and not necessarily having all the good gear.
We're just past the halfway point, so this would be a good reminder for anyone that's watching tonight. Go ahead and throw some questions in the Q&A. I already see that Doug's put some in there. We'll catch those at the end. So, okay, so the next question I had for you, and this relates to that clothing, is have you become aware, or were you already aware of your what I'm going to call your personal temperature, your internal thermometer, and how that, because that influences your clothing layers, and your sleep system, right? So were you always aware of that, or have you become aware of that? Do you know what your temperature is?
So anybody that knows me knows that I am always the coldest person in the room. I do have a couple of friends that will vie for that title, mm-hmm. But for the most part, I'm usually the coldest person in the room, and I've been like that for a really, really long time. I don't tend to regulate once I stop in my, I'm not warm from whatever activity. Mm-hmm. I get really cold really fast. So I do know that about myself. So when we were, in WBC, when they were talking about sleeping bags, and they were saying, oh, well, if it's, rated down to 20, if you sleep cold, or if you're a female, and females, we tend to run colder than, our male counterparts. Not always true, but it is a tendency. They say, if it's rated to 20, then a female might sleep comfortably at 30. And then I go, and then Cynthia's going to sleep comfortably at 40. So I already knew when I heard about the sleeping bag liners and different ways of making sure I was warm once everything stops. I did pay a lot of attention to that. So I have a liner. I always take my rain pants. Mm-hmm. And because at night when I'm sitting around and we're chatting, They make
Yeah.
great to just throw on. You don't have to take
Yeah.
your shoes off, just throw them on, and all of a sudden you've got a windbreaker blanket on your
Nice.
leg.
Awesome. Yeah, because that's I've run into people that aren't aware if they run hot or cold, and that can make a big difference. Because, well, I'll tell you this much: years ago, I advised Miss Sandra the mule that it wasn't going to be cold and to leave the down behind.
Uh-oh.
She's kind of like you. She's probably maybe runs that title for coldest person. I should have known that because I used to work with her, and she was. We got a space heater for her so she could put it under her desk in the summer. She'd wear a blanket to a restaurant. Anyway, I won't ever make that mistake again. Okay, so you'd mentioned food. What have you? Let's come back to food. What have you learned about food, or what? You said that you're real simple on food. So what's working for you on food?
So with food, it's funny, on Facebook pages and stuff, I'll see people post questions, what backpacking food or what hiking food can you not live without? And you get all sorts of different ideas. I'm usually pretty simple, just trail mix and some banana chips. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are my favorite. Although one luxury I will say is I do put my sandwich in a plastic container, because I have put it in my backpack and I'm thinking, I can do this. I can just choke down the pancake sandwich. And it's like, no, I really just don't like the pancake sandwich. I'll take the plastic container. Okay. So,
okay, nice.
I do that. The thing about food mostly that I've learned, I've got two things. Learned a lot of tidbits about what to do in the winter, like, some peanut butter right before you
keep those
go
calories up. The idea. Yeah.
Calories up. Like I said, paying attention to how to keep warm.
Right.
So there are different things like that, having some dark chocolate as well in the evening, help sleep, stuff like that. So the help sleep and help stay warm kind of.
Right.
I do like a good hot tea in the evening because it warms me up from the inside out. And so,
right, because I've heard of some thru hikers that go stoveless. It's like, well, okay, is it not necessarily for weight savings, but more for simplicity's sake? And that's one of the things that you'd forego, is a hot drink in the morning or in the evening. So, okay. And one of the things that I learned about food is that I'm the opposite of you as far as food. I'm a foodie, but I learned really quickly that I've always known this about myself. I hate doing dishes. So I don't want to clean a frying pan. I don't want to clean a damn spatula. I don't want to bring a scrubber pad. None of that stuff. So I didn't want to, I learned real quickly that I don't want to do elaborate meals on the trail, but I'll do some significant work at home and prep it, and then bring a moderately elaborate trail that's quick to prepare on the trail, but I did a lot of work at home. So.
Yeah, I use a lot of Ziploc bags. You can double bag beanie weenies, and you don't have to cook those bad boys at all. You got all the sodium and fat and protein you ever need.
That is true, because I know when I go shopping for food at my local grocery store, not part of my family shopping, I'll do it just for me. I look like the biggest stoner ever, because there is so much garbage I'm getting. It's like, I don't eat Pop-Tarts and jelly beans and all this other crap normally, but on the trail, oh yeah, I will totally.
Pop-Tarts are awesome on the trail.
Aren't they though? The one that we need to try is a Pop-Tart peanut butter jelly sandwich.
Ooh.
I haven't done that yet. I know. Doesn't that sound? I might try that for lunch tomorrow.
There you go.
You mentioned you had used a loaner backpack. Do you have a different backpack now? Or
I do have a different backpack. So that's the other cool thing about borrowing gear, is you get to try stuff out and see if you like it. I like this part of this and I like this part of this before you actually purchase. And then when you go to make your purchase, whether you're, diving in and getting a really expensive pack, or you're still just like, okay, I need something decent, you at least know a little bit more about what you like, what you want.
Yeah.
So my first few backpack trips, I was borrowing a ULA pack. So that's the ultralight, and they had even taken the frame out. So
Oh, wow. Very stripped down. Yeah.
Very stripped down pack. I used that for 3 of the 4 trips. And then I used Deuters.
Mm-hmm.
A friend had let me borrow that one. And I actually think that one was too big. Now that I think about how it didn't fit well, I think it was too big for me. And right now I purchased myself for Christmas a Gregory 53 liter. So
what's interesting about packs is it does take some time to get it to fit you right. Because I remember my first backpacking trip on WBC, the entire trip, I'm fussing with everything. Now I throw on my backpack, I cinch up the hip belt, and everything else like, yep, this is my second skin. But it's taken a long time to get that, and I have the right pack. I think it was just 2, maybe 3 seasons ago, I was in the middle of a summer trip, and I finally came to the realization that my hip belt was too big. I just couldn't get it to fit. I've had this pack for years, and I just figured this out. So that takes some real time. So, okay, we've got a couple questions that I think are worth asking, so I'm going to bring those up. So, where have you been? Where have you been backpacking since the WBC? What's some of the places you've been? You've done a couple of really cool trips.
So backpacking, I've actually done Cucamonga Peak twice. I did it first last summer, and then it was actually my first solo backpacking.
Oh, nice. Trip. That's great.
Yeah, so I branched out. I car camp by myself all the time, but I hadn't backpacked yet by myself. And I was like, all right, well, I love Cucamonga Peak at night, and I know that one. So did that one. And then we were just at Taquitos, kind of in the Meadows, little Taquitos Valley area. So,
yeah, that's nice. I like that.
Weekend. Yeah.
Now, do you have anything on your any backpacks on your bucket list that you definitely want to go do?
Backpack trips? I really, really, and I know it's super simple, and I could probably just shoot up there any day I wanted to, but I want to get up to the Yosemite Valley and, just Ansel Adams Wilderness, just that whole area up there. I want to go just really spend some time. What I seem to do is before I leave the trail, I have a pretty good idea where we're going next year. And when I get bored, I use Caltopo. That's my go-to for planning at home. And I have 6 or 8 different routes. I'm like, I wonder how this would work, and this would be really cool. And so that's kind of fun. Kelly had a really good comment that he said, the first cost for new backpackers can be scary. So all the advice to start with less expensive, heavier stuff is smart. I like that. Later, it's much easier to change one item out, and always a good idea as you change it. My suggestion on that is the cheapest and lightest gear is the gear that stays at home or stays at the store. Well, or that somebody else carries. That's a good one too. But if you don't buy it, it's really cheap. And if it stays at home, it's super light. So that's always a good way to do it. And it's the cheapest way of doing it. But then after that, you target those big 3, right? So sleeping bag, pack, and tent. And actually pack is the last one to do it. So condense it down. Because I know when I changed from a synthetic bag to a down bag, I was able to downsize my pack and get a lighter pack. And that made a big difference. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I had been borrowing a tent. So I got a tent, got the little quarter dome, REI quarter dome. It's 2 pounds. So it's nice, lots of room.
Awesome.
And I'll need to replace my sleeping bag at some point, but that's the one just kind of chipping away is what I'm doing. Right.
Now, what is hard about those big 3 is those are going to be the expensive ones.
Mhm.
So it's really easy to go into REI with $25, burn a hole in your pocket, and get a cool widget for 25 bucks.
Mhm.
Well, that's another 5 ounces. It's another 12 ounces. It's a, and then it just adds up. But they get a bunch of crap that you bring. I've gotten good about leaving stuff at home, but I still have them. So I have
Mhm.
those cool widgets. They're just sitting off to the side and I'm not using them. Well,
Let's-
we're out of time. So
Okay.
I want to say thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate you sharing some of your insight. And I know that that's helpful to people that have been around for a while, but also for people that might be considering this. So we appreciate that. Thanks so much for your insight.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Oh yeah, it's a blast. And what's funny is I usually tell people like the time goes by really quick, and it's like, yeah, okay, we're done. So next week, I'm going to be back with another episode of shit went wrong, and the lessons that people learn from that. So these are the horror stories that you might hear around the campfire that hikers tell. Like, there it was a bear had my foot, and I was poking at him with a stick. What happened? Did you die? So we're going to be talking about that next week. So got a couple people that I'm hoping to have on. So that's what we're sharing. Again, thanks everybody. Glad you could tune in. If you're on YouTube, enjoy. Cynthia, thanks again. Take care,
You're
everybody.
welcome. All right. Bye, everybody.